So the story, it's like sad at first, but then it gets pretty good at the end. It makes you happy. So in the areas that I served in my mission, I started in Madison, Wisconsin. Then I went up to Wausau, Wisconsin, which was one of my favorite areas. And then I went to Appleton. And after that, I went to Sheboygan, which interestingly enough, if you've seen Surf's Up, that's where Chicken Joe is from. If you've ever seen that movie. It's a good movie. Anyways, Chicken Joe. And so after Sheboygan, I got called to Green Bay as a district leader. And that was like the beginning of like my trial on my mission, pretty much, like my hard time. And that's kind of what I was going to talk about a little bit, was how hard it was for me there. It was tough. I remember I was in Sheboygan and a new missionary was going to come out, and I was like pretty excited because I was in a perfect position to train a new missionary, and I never trained before, and so I was like super like pumped up and excited that it could be me that would train the new Hmong missionary coming out. And I got a call after we got out of a lesson with this guy named Pana, and the mission president talked to me and he's like, I want to ask you to be a district leader in another area. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. I guess I might not be training. And then he asked me to give the phone to Elder Zhang, and he asked Elder Zhang to train the new guy in the area. And I was like, what? I was like, come on, I wanted to train. But I was pretty excited. I was like, this will be good. This will be pretty cool. Going to a new area. I'll be a district leader. It'll be a really new experience for me. Really fun to like serve other missionaries and stuff. And so I get up to Green Bay, and I'm with a pretty new missionary. His name was Elder Thompson. He just got done being trained by the person who trained me, who just went home, pretty much. And so I replaced my trainer in that area. And I remember getting to the area, and it was right when winter was starting, and there wasn't too many people to teach right when I got there. There were a lot of people that were kind of flaky. People that weren't very committed to meeting with the missionaries. And it's about the time, like in January, when it's going to get really cold in Green Bay and Wisconsin in general. And it's about the time when the days are really short. It's a time when it's almost always dark. There's almost always overcasts. It's almost always snowing. Half the time I didn't have a car in that area. I didn't have a car half the time in almost all my areas. So we had to walk around in the freezing cold trying to find new people because we didn't have too many people to teach in general. And so I remember trying my hardest because I was pretty good at finding people when I got to an area that was kind of dead-ish. And so we were trying to find some people to teach, and nothing was working. Nothing at all. We found this guy to teach, but he ended up going to jail. Because I think he was found in like possession of drugs, and so he went to jail. And his wife was a less active member, and so we tried to like comfort her and everything like that. But that was like our main investigator, and he was gone. And so we're like, what are we gonna do? Like, how are we gonna find people to teach? And we kept on trying and trying and trying and trying and tracking and tracking and tracking and tracking in the snow, in the cold, in the dark. And nobody wanted to talk to us. It was really hard in that area. And it started to really get to me. Like, just being in the dark all the time, not seeing the sun, that's like a environmental issue that would set you up for depression really easily. And then on top of that, not having any success with anybody, that just pushed me over the top. And I remember I was with a companion that I ended up serving with for over 7 months too. And so I knew him really well, and I was used to him and everything like that. But every now and then we would kind of get on each other's nerves. And I admit it, every companion does. Like, we all get on each other's nerves sometimes. But for the most part, we loved each other. We loved serving with each other. But at times it was so hard for me to even be a missionary because we weren't having any success, and I just wasn't feeling good about life. Not something a missionary should feel at all. They should be happy almost all the time, but that's almost never true. And I remember being with my companion, Elder Vang, and we were teaching this less active member named Bai, and her boyfriend, Sith. Sith wasn't really listening to us at the time. He wasn't really joining in on the lessons. He was Laotian, by the way. He wasn't even Hmong. And we started teaching Bai and her friend Amanda, who were trying to return to church and everything like that, returning less actives. And we were teaching them about the temple one day. And Sith, he pokes his head in, and he like looks at us. He's like, "What are you guys doing? Like, what are you guys teaching about?" And we're like, "Oh, come on over, Sith." And he starts checking it out. We start talking to him about how families can be sealed in the temple forever. And he's just like kind of really interested in that. And later that night, Sith ended up giving us a ride home. And in the car, Bai was like, "Hey, you guys should teach Sith." And we're like, me and Elder Van were like, "Yeah, we'll teach anybody at this point." And so we were super excited. She said that Sith hadn't taken the lessons from missionaries in years. And no missionaries really been able to really find them because they kind of disappeared off the map for just a little amount of time. And so we started teaching them, and I started teaching Sith. And it was really hard because Bai and Sith weren't married or anything like that. And we were super nervous about teaching them about the law of chastity because they were living with each other. And but eventually it worked out, and they got married. And really, really sadly, I spent 6 months in Green Bay, but Sith got baptized a week after I left Green Bay. And I wasn't able to go back up for the baptism or anything like that, so I was just left to hear about it. That my one baptism went through in Green Bay, that my one success story in Green Bay went through, and I was super happy about that, and I was happy for him and Bai, because they were starting that new step in their relationship and everything, because they did get married, and they moved in to a new place and everything. But shortly after I get home from my mission, I found out they stopped going to church a little bit, and I was kind of like hurt. I was like, no, like, Sith, why? Like, you were so cool, like, you were so golden, like, why did you stop going? Like, you knew it was true, like, you had such a strong testimony when we were teaching you, and it was really hard to hear that they weren't going very often anymore and that they were fighting with each other. But recently, I got a message from Bai saying, "Hey, I'm actually reading in Helaman now." And when she was in Green Bay, when I was in Green Bay, she was reading in Alma, and so it was like, it's sort of a gap, but she was progressing in like reading the Book of Mormon. I was like, yes. I told her, I'm way proud of you. And then like maybe a month or so later, she says, "I bore my testimony for the first time in Fast and Testimony meeting. Me and Sith did too." And I was just like, yes. I was like, yes. They went back to church and they actually bore their testimonies. I was super pumped, super happy. And I found out that they actually moved over to like Northern California, over around near the Bay Area. And I feel like that was a huge step for them. They started going to church and everything. And from what I hear, they're doing actually really, really well. And so it was really interesting, because when I was in Green Bay, though, and I was really depressed and everything, I didn't see it at the time that everything would work out. I remember one time before we get like our transfer info, I remember like going into my room and just kneeling and praying, "God, I want to be transferred. Like, I want to get out because nothing is working. I'm not happy here. No success whatsoever. I'm miserable here. I want some success." But something that was really, really interesting, it really hit me, was, when Savior was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he was kneeling down and he was praying to God, and he was saying, "Let this cup pass from me." Like, the Savior didn't want to do it because it was going to hurt so bad. But then the key phrase that he said that really hit me really hard when I was sitting there praying was, "But not my will, but thine be done." And so I remember sitting there thinking about that phrase for like 30 minutes, just like, not my will, but thine be done. And that prayer actually came after I got the transfer text saying that I was staying. And I was like, I was a wreck right after I found out I was staying. And I was like, I need to do something about this because I can't be a missionary like this. So I went and I prayed and I had that experience, and that really changed my perspective and gave me the energy that I needed, the motivation that I needed to keep working hard. And it was like a week after that we started teaching Sith. And so I know if I didn't feel that way, or if I didn't have that prayer or anything like that, I don't know what would have happened, but I might not have been able to teach him, and he might not have been baptized, and he might not be in the position that he's in right now.